Hi, I'm Sandy and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you two cards I made coloring one of my own digital stamps using Copic markers. For this project I printed the images on Copic Express Ink blending card paper using a black and white laser printer. This paper is really nice to color on and it's a bit thinner than the Nina that I usually use, so it worked really well going through my printer. And for this project I don't need really thick paper. So this image is of a lady mailing an envelope. In this case, she's sending a Valentine, but it can be used for anything like Happy Mail or a letter to Santa. I live in Canada, and Canada Post mailboxes are a specific shade of red. That's a stamp dispenser off on the left there. I have a limited collection of red shades, so I'm using a light and medium color red and a gray to darken the medium red for a darker shade. My light source is from the left, so anything on the right will be in shadow and therefore darker. The technique that I use mostly for Copic coloring is to start out with my lightest shade just to saturate the area I'm coloring, and then I usually go in with the darker and then the medium and then back through the whole thing again with light. But I do go back and forth and when I look and see that maybe some areas are not as dark as I'd like them to be, so I usually do go back in and do some fixing up. I made two cards in this video, and so I'm put the main colors that I used up there on the top middle of the screen, and I'll also put the caps up so you can see what colors I'm using. Other than the mailboxes, the coloring for both cards is identical, so you'll see me switch back and forth between them. And since many of my card making friends are in the US, I thought I'd do a blue USPS version as well. The next little bit is mostly just coloring, so I'll stop talking and put on some music. As usual, I really had no plan. I knew that I wanted to cut the images out and I wanted to put them behind a frame and I wanted to put them on acetate because I wanted to have some hearts floating off of the envelope. For the frames, I used Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock, cut at 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. And I used a Simon Says Stamp stitched rectangle and stitched circles dies. In hindsight, I kind of wish that I had printed one of them a little bit smaller to fit inside that circle. I should have actually measured my die before I even started, but I didn't. And I did like the way that it turned out in the end, but I didn't end up cutting off a lot of my coloring. So I used some light pencil marks to indicate where the frames were going to be after I placed the image behind them. And I cut all the way around the image right to the edge, except for the part that was going to be sitting behind the frame. I just needed enough white paper left to attach the image to the back of the frame. And then I just went around the image with a black Copic marker to make sure that there were no white edges showing. And then I just used a little bit of adhesive to attach it to the back of the frame. So for the card with the square frame, I'm going to leave a little bit of snow showing, and so it's a little bit off screen, apologize for that, but I just made some pencil marks after I lined up the image behind the frame, showing where the snow was. You can see it a little bit there now, and then I just marked the outside edges so I would know where I was going to cut. And just like the other one, I just cut all the way around the edges except for the part that was going to be behind the frame, and I went all the way around the edges with a black Copic marker from the back side just to make sure I didn't accidentally get any black on the front of the image. And then, same as before, I just erased those pencil lines and attached the image to the back of the frame. For the backgrounds, I cut 2 pieces of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock at just slightly smaller size. I think it was 5.25 by 4 inches. And then I used some Peacock Feathers Distress Ink just at the very top of the cards, and then I blended it a little bit darker on the top, blending down to the bottom, just for a little bit of sky color. I've got the Tombow Glass Distress Ink out there, but I ended up not using it. I just used the one color. And I did that for both pieces. Then I just placed the images over the sky pieces to see that they lined up, and I added a few finishing touches to the coloring. A couple highlight spots with the Signo white pen, and I use a Jelly Roll Metallic just for the buttons for each of the images. I adhered those 2 sky backgrounds to 2 5.5 by 4.25 inch side folding card bases cut out of the same fog cardstock. And then I'm just taking my MISTI and lining up my sentiment. I mentioned before I'm a terrible stamper, and I just really like my MISTI for stamping, especially when I've already kind of completed the front of a card. The sentiments I'm using are from the Simon Says Stamp Sending and Wishing stamp sets, and you can see on the left there I've also die cut out the sending die out of some glitter cardstock. And then I've just cut 2 pieces of acetate, just slightly smaller than the 5.5 by 4.25 inch card fronts. I just used overhead transparencies for this. So I'm just using some Tombow Permanent Adhesive to attach the acetate to the fronts of the cards. And then wiping off the acetate just to make sure there's no fingerprints or any fuzz left before I attach the card fronts to the card bases. And then I was just lining up the sending die cut just to see where I was going to put it before I actually attached it. And I'm just using a little bit of Ranger Multimedia Matte. And I'm holding this die cut with tweezers just to make sure I don't get my fingers sticky and get glue all over the place. This glue, even if it does smush out a little bit, it'll be okay because it does dry matte. And I'm just going to put a acrylic block over top of the one on the left just to make sure that it dries flat. I'm always losing the dots for the eyes, and so there's the glitter card stock that I used. I just left it in there until I needed it so I didn't lose them. And I'll also attach those using the Ranger Multimedia Matte. And that there is pretty much the extent of all the sequins that I have. It's actually Martha Stewart kit that I had gotten, and they're just tiny, tiny little sequins, but all I wanted was the little tiny hearts out of there. And these are some puffy stickers I just picked up at Michael's. And I just glued them right onto the acetate with the sticky back. Now I'm using a little bit of foam tape to pop the front of the card up. I'm assembling it pretty much the same as a shaker card, but I'm not putting any sequins or anything in behind. What I really wanted was to show a little bit of dimension and have that lady sort of popping out from the back of the card with the sky in the background. And I wanted those hearts to look like they were floating in the air. Put a little bit of foam tape in behind the lady as well, and that will make it a little bit more sturdy for mailing. And just removing the backs of the foam tape and attaching it to the front of the card. And that's the one card completed. The card on the left, you can kind of see that the sentiment that I stamped didn't really turn out that well. As I mentioned, I'm not very good at stamping. And so I just cut out a piece of the same cardstock, the same width as the card, and I just stamped it again. And then I cut very narrow pieces of the glitter cardstock and just glued that on either side. And then I just allowed that to dry and I trimmed off those ends. And that completes these two cards. Thanks so much for watching. I will list all supplies used in the video description below. This digital stamp is also available for purchase, and I will provide a link to my store in the description as well. Please feel free to comment, like, or subscribe, or all three. And feel free to check out any of my other videos, like this one using the Crazy Bird stamp set. Thanks again, and have a great day. Bye!